Welcome back, folks. It's the Two Ordinary Cops, and it's a bit of a somber one today, Schultzy. How are you travelling?
Yeah, mate, not too bad. I mean, I'm pretty busy. Of course, a bit of sad news over the weekend with the recent incident down at Bondi, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight because we will get Susie back on and probably Kath back on to talk about Brett, but we thought as an interim we should pay dedication to I suppose the victims of Bondi and also the police that had to attend as well. So we're just going to have a bit of a discussion about that.
Yeah, mate. And look, when we say police, it's bloody first responders and civilians being absolute just gangsters. There
Yeah.
was some unbelievable heroics showed by unarmed civilians at that matter, and I have no doubt that even the ones that weren't um, in the media, there would have been so many little things that occurred that day. There would have so many people would have showed courage. There would have been a hell of a lot of panic, which is completely reasonable. In that, as you know, you think of an untrained person running like hell. But anyway, we'll get into that later. But I think we can sort of summarise what we've been doing for the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Obviously, tonight we're going to talk about Bondi, but we haven't sort of had a chat to just us for a while. So obviously, we're going through the Brett Fort series and really breaking that down and giving that human element to both Kath and Susie's story about the incident with Brett Fort in 2017. So we've been covering that, and we're getting some great feedback from it, and it's. I'm glad we can do that. That's sort of the goal. We keep saying it. The normalisation of the police force. That's our job. So yeah, that's what we've been doing. It's nearly Christmas time, but we've had a bit of a dampener, and I think we can go into that now and sort of break down what we know and what we don't know, and more to the point, what we don't know, Schultzy.
Exactly, mate. That's always the thing when all this shit kicks off, and you get everybody putting their 2 cents worth in. Yeah, we don't know shit at the
Yeah,
moment.
we know
And that's what
nothing.
and that's what, hey, Sergeant Schultz, I know
Yeah,
nothing.
yeah, yeah.
Um, the thing is, there will be an investigation into this, and that's what investigations are for, to look into in-depth detail of why, well, this sort of thing happened, and how to possibly prevent it in the future. Um,
Yeah,
but I think, like, hats off to everybody. Like you said, apparently there was a nurse that ran out and helped out in bare feet and all that sort of thing, just to help out. We had a courageous guy that disarmed one of the shooters.
mm,
And the police showing up, and everybody that took cover. Apparently, there was a husband that covered his wife from the shootings and got shot.
yeah,
All that sort of stuff. It's human tragedy.
yeah.
Um, but there is some heroics, and it shows human nature and normalisation of people when they get in those incidents.
Yeah, definitely. So I think we'll give a bit of chronology to it. So this is the information that is currently in the public, and we'll just sort of comment on and sort of add in what we would think about a situation like this. So, roughly 6:45 at night on Sunday, the 13th of December. Obviously there's a Hanukkah event taking place on the beach at Bondi, and Hanukkah is compared to the Christmas for the Jewish faith. So you've got a celebration occurring, as happens everywhere all the time in Australia, and should be allowed to go on without any interruption, let alone a murderous one. So 6:47, I think the timings were. Two men opened fire upon that crowd, and then chaos reigns from there. So a few things that, without the facts directly in front of me, I've read through a few things, but our idea is not to break down the facts, it's just to humanise it. So very shortly thereafter, a number of police have responded to the incident. And what I can tell is that it looks like there's been mention that a forensic unit was driving past and they've stopped as well. We'll talk about the criticism and just have a laugh at them, because, hey, if I sat in my mum's basement eating KFC and playing Call of Duty, I'd be a superstar gunshot too. So yeah, you guys are irrelevant, completely and utterly irrelevant. So just do the world a favour and shut your mouth. I'll get more to that later on, but yeah, obviously a couple of police first on scene. What I often find interesting is people have 2020 hindsight and then say what they would have done, and it's like, well, they had no hindsight. They had a report, oh, we've got armed offenders, there's talk of shooting, or where's the shooter, where's the shooter? Next minute there's bullets coming through your windscreen. You still don't know where the shooter is. So they're going, where's the shooter? Shit, take cover. Obviously you're responding to that. The big thing for the police would be turning up and then going, what the hell have we got? What have we got? And then reporting that information back. Those sit reps, those immediate sit reps would need to be really quickly disseminated. I have no doubt they were. I think the police radio that would have occurred around that time would be terrifying listening. To me, it would have been just urgent shots fired, multiple gun shooters, urgent backup. There would have been lots of that going on, which just raises my cockles. Having heard similar things a number of times, and just bloody having to listen to all the radio after the Ben Hoffman shooting. I heard all that sort of thing, and the Ben Hoffman shooting was on nowhere near this kind of scale, and certainly not concentrated in one place. So while it was an active shooter event that I've attended, it wasn't, and not attended the field. I didn't actually turn up and face off with him or anything like that. It's an interesting, I think we even take it back a step and just go, 6:45 at night. Correct me, New South Wales Police, if I'm wrong, but I'm fairly certain that New South Wales Police work 12-hour shifts, and that they would have been probably at shift change at that point. So there would have been guys kitting up at 6:45, as we used to do, like we've said plenty of times. So it's probably likely that day shift were there. It's likely that night shift would be starting to be coming in dribs and drabs and be starting to kit up and getting ready and waiting for a briefing and going from there, the day's activities, what's going on. And you imagine, you turn up to your police station and there it is. Any unit call, urgent, we've got reports of shots fired, armed offenders at Bondi Beach. Multiple calls, massive numbers of calls coming through now. So it's on, job's on. When the dispatchers are saying to you multiple 000 calls, that's multiple people who aren't interested in each other. There's no collaboration to call 000. You know that job's on. The guys would have been scrambling to kit up and get in those vehicles and get out there really quickly. The timings, it looks like the whole thing lasted 10 minutes. I'm not going to go into detail because we don't know. So they've turned up. What we do know is that 2 police officers that were there fairly early on have suffered gunshot wounds and quite critical gunshot wounds. I saw something today where there's a young fella there, 4 months in the job, probationary constable, who's now missing an eye from a gunshot wound to the head. So they were obviously running towards what was going on. Obviously the matters continued for some minutes. And eventually police have been able to shoot and kill one of the offenders, the older offender, and obviously shoot and incapacitate the other to the point where they were able to take him into custody. During that time, it looks like at least 2 separate civilian elements have tried to disarm that older offender. I see there was a couple that had some interaction with him and tried to disarm him and failed, and were both fatally shot. And then there was Ahmed Al-Ahmed has a fella from Sydney has run over unarmed and grabbed the older offender from behind and taken the shotgun off him. I think it was a button release shotgun by the looks of it. And I'm not by any means, I know a bit about guns, but I'm not going to carry on about guns. It just creates opinions from dickheads who I don't want to hear about. So it looks like he wasn't able to actually operate the gun, or that he was happy that old mate was now unarmed and was moving away. He wasn't to know that the older offender was to then rearm himself with another gun that was on the bridge. So, you've got an absolutely terrible scene. So as a result, that's now that those people are incapacitated, you've now got a mass casualty event. I think there's 29 people in hospital and 15 deceased, 16 all up, including one of the offenders, but he doesn't count. So this is absolute chaos. You can't. This is where it's really hard, and where the experts who weren't there just shut up. Like self-appointed experts, I might say. You've got to deal with. You can only deal with what's in front of you, and all of a sudden, there's an enormous amount of problems in front of you. They would have seen things they've never seen before. They would have been running through there. There would have been horrific injuries to bodies on the ground, horrific injuries to people screaming, panicking people running everywhere. It would have been absolute chaos beyond anything that really occurs much in this country. The only, there'd be a handful of people, a lot of military people would have seen similar things overseas on deployment, but not at Bondi Beach. The iconic Bondi Beach, the place of celebration.
Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it? I think, and also one of the important things is, and we've spoken about leadership before, and it's when shit hits the fan like that, that leadership really, really counts. You get those really good leaders that step in and guide the younger troops and all that sort of thing. That's one of the things I picked out about it, but like you said, everything's so much chaos. People don't know where the shots are coming from. It takes a while to orientate, yourself to where the threat is and what are the threat and who you have to protect. It's not like, watching it on a YouTube or whatever. You're sitting there going, you already know where they are because, of course, you're watching it without any threat to yourself. So, but you think of those people on the ground, they didn't have that, luxury. It's like all these people commenting, the self-appointed experts are talking in hindsight. Well, go out there and face that yourself and then find out how hard it is. Because, you and I have both been to scenes not like that, but, where it's absolute chaos. And it takes a while to orientate yourself and, decide the best course of action.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, we'll leave the keyboard warriors. They are what they are. We all know about that. But the big thing to me here is as well, I know you mentioned leadership. Well, the thing is, I think it was too fast. There was probably leadership on their way. But, I mean, what are they going to do? They turn up and go, what do we got? And we don't know. People are shot. There's people dead everywhere and there's bullets still flying, Police cars are getting shot up. It's just, there is nothing more they could have done. I can't criticise the response from New South Wales Police for a second. If it is true that I think there was comment that 2 female officers turned up and they were forensics officers. Generally speaking, forensics officers are unarmed. Because they don't need to be armed. They carry enough crap with them. They don't need to be armed. Their job is to turn up to a secure crime scene and go from there. And yeah, sure, they're first responders as well. But generally speaking, a mass shooting is not something that they would be expected to attend as a first responder. Yet they did anyway. And there's a little bit of criticism, but I mean, I just dismiss it. And I want to sort of pass that on to people who are getting angry with people speaking. The best response to them is whatever. You are irrelevant. When a donkey goes ee-aw, does anyone care? No. It's just no. That's what donkeys do. So I think just treat them like donkeys. Yeah, donkeys ee-aw. There's a few ee-awing at the moment. We've got a mob of donkeys hanging around. So what? Move on. They don't matter. They are irrelevant people. They've never done this. They'll never do this. They'll never. This may sound really harsh, but they'll never be remembered. They're irrelevant. You've got opinions about things that you know nothing about. I don't know anything about brain surgery, so why would I comment on it? It's that. It's just I don't have an opinion on it because I know nothing about it. But anyway, that's that sort of rant. But I think where the leadership that we were speaking about before, where that really would have come to the fore, would have been right. Okay, offenders in custody. This is the other thing that a lot of people don't think of. Oh, yeah, right. Well, the 2 blokes are down. Who told you there's 2 blokes there? How many people? Do I know how many blokes are there? I have no idea. We're not finished yet. We're not finished until we're finished. Who's not to say that they weren't the first wave of another attack? Who knows? You have no idea. Given a lot of extremist Islamist attacks around the world, there's a lot of explosives involved, and there were in this one too, in this incident as well. And just, I think, thank God that nothing actually. It sounds like there were no detonations, but the reports were that IEDs are found. So you're thinking, right, we've got this guy still alive. He's in custody. Well, he's wearing a backpack. From what I could see, it looked like one of them at least had a backpack on. What's in that? I have no idea. Is that going to detonate and blow me and this bridge to pieces and everyone else around me? Is there a second wave turning up in a vehicle that's going to wait till there's a lot of police around and then start shooting police in the back as they turn up? You don't know. It's mass fear, mass casualties. People watch too much television, play too many computer games, and are never involved in this stuff. Without getting political, even doing national service training would give some level of experience to the general population that no, those guys faced it for real and they did a good job, Instead of, oh yeah, man, I'm a Call of Duty superhero. I'm all over that shit. It's like, nah, no, you're not. That's a game. Enjoy it and have fun. And I'm not
Yeah.
knocking my mate Kevin Pace because he'll do it for you real, but he loves Call of Duty.
Mate, look, you're exactly right, and you brought up a very, very good point there. What's to say there wasn't more shooters? And this is things that would have been going through their mind. And police are trained in actually looking and observing around. Your peripheral vision and all that sort of stuff. So, that's one of the things I have to account for because it's fair enough. You've got the both of them down, but then you've got to worry, is there another wave coming? You've got to consider the safety of everybody involved, considering first responders as well as the public. And obviously they were trying to revive one of the offenders and also, giving medical aid to one of them after they just shot them. So there's a lot going on. And I don't think, unless you've been involved in that situation, then you can't really comment or you can't have a say. That's my thought on it.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, that's right. I mean, we live in free speech. You can say what you like, but I also have the right to completely ignore you and ridicule you, basically, because you don't know what you're talking about. So whatever. But
Yeah,
I
that's
think,
right.
yeah, more the moving on from the actual righto, we've got active armed offenders now. Okay, those two are neutralised. That the threat is apparently now contained. But what shit show carnage have we got now to deal with? So the job doesn't end. You need massive numbers. You need ambos. There were ambos everywhere. I was just amazed to see the number there. So obviously you've now got a critical mass casualty event. So you're falling straight into that urgent triage, moving through the crowd, seeing who you can and can't save, removing the public that aren't injured from the area to sterilise the area and allow the first responders to get in there and do their thing. The other thing is you mightn't have all hands on deck with, well, not mightn't, you definitely don't have all hands on deck yet with first responders. So you're going to be appreciative of the assistance of genuine people who are offering correct first aid. That's going to be a very important thing, that you actually use the human resources that are, what do we call them, spontaneous volunteers that are there and happy to assist first aid. And you're going to have to provide a massive level of leadership to the civilian population who are now swinging into action to help. You've got to protect them. Police especially need to have their head on a swivel and be looking for further threats. But you also need to now be moving into that recovery phase where you're starting to, let's get the people who can be saved off to hospital. We're still not thinking about crime scenes yet, but you have to, as a supervisor, I kind of would be a little bit. I'd be thinking, don't move bodies, leave them there. Let's get people who don't need to be here. If there's someone around who's not helpful, get rid of them. If we've got spontaneous volunteers who are helpful, let's use them. And obviously use them to their capacity that they're willing to provide. They're volunteers. But as soon as they're not required, they need to be very nicely asked to move away from the scene, because we need to move into that. It's righto, we've got ambos here, we've got plenty of paramedics, we're providing the care. We need to start pre-warning hospitals that we're going to have mass casualties coming their way. Mate, job's on like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah, mate, you're exactly right. And look, another point, you move those people on, but one of the things is also witness statements later on. You've got to account for people there, what they saw, because every bit of information that you can get from witnesses is important. So you want to grab their details as quickly as you can, so then you can contact them at a later date. Now, that might sound a bit, probably not right in your field of vision, and it's probably not, but however, it's important that you try and get that information because they can move on and go home. Maybe they don't want to hang around, that area because of the destruction and all that sort of thing. So, and that's something you've also got to think about. So we've just mentioned so many things these officers had to think of on the ground without the resources that they probably need to actually carry out all that stuff. So you can give them a hell of a lot of leeway in relation to not getting everything perfect.
Oh, mate, no. You point me to the first critical incident where everything's been done perfectly. It simply does not occur. There is no. What everyone needs to do is their best, and that's all you can do. The information at the time, you can only do what you can do, and you don't have much information. And I think that's our point. It's these guys ran in there and did what they could do. The Ambos would have been the same. They would have been turning up. You've got to overcome your very human response of holy shit, and it's just you would be overwhelmed, and you have to try and snap out of that. You have to go, right, job's on, snap out of it. Let's triage patients. Who have we got? No, deceased, critical, deceased. There'd be someone going through there, once resources arrived, which did happen relatively quickly. You've got to remember that traffic in Sydney, you've got to get the resources to Bondi Beach. So once you get the resources there, that's when some element of charge needs to be taken. And you've got different organisations. The New South Wales Ambulance Service and the New South Wales Police Force are two completely different organisations. Yeah, they work together all the time operationally, but they now have to coordinate and work together on the ground. And you need to start getting a little bit of unity of command there. That's where someone needs to turn up and go, all right, I'm the senior police officer here. I will take charge of this scene. New South Wales Ambulance, what do you need from me? And go from there. And that I have no doubt that would have occurred. But you made a very good point there. We do need to know who these people are. We need to get we need evidence collection eventually. So is it we get rid of everybody through a checkpoint where everyone provides their information, where we can then go back through that checkpoint and find those individuals and get their statement eventually, which would be occurring hand over fist now. So, yeah, I just want to try and paint a picture in the eye of people who haven't been there of this is the biggest police response event in an iconic area for so long. Port Arthur in 1996, that was the last time that there's really been an incident like this in this country. And just to respond to it is just an incredible thing. It will be the job that you remember for the rest of your life, the rest of your career, whether it be 10 years long or 35 years long.
Yeah, mate, I guarantee that. And look, also, like, one of the things you're talking about, actually, response, getting the coordinating, the ambulances and all that sort of thing. And both you and I have spoken about Bush, about the lack of resources, of getting what we need done. But you almost have the opposite problem in the city. Yeah, you got resources, but getting them to the location, because you've got things like traffic. So it's so heavily populated. Trying to move, like, if you wanted a car to drive down the road in Ramagini, you do 110, not see someone. Whereas, you try doing that in Sydney, it's not going to happen. So that's just another point that people need to actually look at when you're doing this sort of thing, because it's like the opposite of when we were at Bush. And that's something that, look, it'd honestly be a shit fight. I'd hate to try and manage that.
Yeah, it'd be one of those. Yeah, I mean, we've mentioned it, but yeah, that unity of command is a really big thing, because there's nothing worse than having 5 bosses all saying different things. So you've got a major incident, all of a sudden you do need unity of command. You need someone to come in and go, right, what is our number one objective right now? It is we are protecting life. Okay, we've stopped a threat. So basically it's bloody first aid. Danger. We have apparently removed the danger. However, we can't confirm that, so we still need heads on a swivel to make sure there's no further danger. Because now we've got lots and lots of vulnerable first responders, being spontaneous volunteer first aiders and paramedics, as well as lots and lots of police coming into the area. We need to make sure there is a security element to that. Secondly, we now need to triage these patients and get them to the critical care that they need immediately. Do we need further resources from around the city to come in and start blocking roads so that we can get ambulances very quickly to where they need to go? We do need to keep in mind an investigative point of view here. It's back of mind. It's not the primary objective, but you have to keep it in mind. If something doesn't need to be disturbed, can we make sure someone keeps it undisturbed? I've said it before, a crime scene needs to be a place of extreme inactivity. So if we've got an area where there are 4 deceased people and there's nothing else needed there, we need to lock that down. It may sound callous, but quite often we will leave bodies in place because they offer information as to what's occurred. Obviously we've got a pretty good indicator of who's done this, but we still need to conduct a thorough investigation and put a timeline together for the coroner and for the Supreme Court ultimately. So the number of things that you would need to take charge of there, and you would very quickly have to give some very clear basic objectives to your more senior police. If you were to turn up and you now find yourself an incident controller for something like this, you need to be farming out some very quick objectives. Number 1 objective is this, achieve that. Number 2 objective is this, achieve that. Work through it. You can't just stand there and panic and invoke the chaos. You need to bring calm through that chaos. And obviously I think, in probably a year or two, well, probably 2 years, when we hear about the coronial outcome, that the investigation, and possibly, who knows what kind of public inquest will be held into this. It's not no doubt. I know that there will be levels of inquest held into this. It will be very interesting to read through that and how that was actually dealt with, if it is even, if it's mentioned thoroughly. But once again, we're just talking from the point of 2 ordinary cops, and having dealt with a few, critical incidents, obviously nowhere near this, but critical incidents, I just know that the things I would have been thinking of were this.
Yeah, mate. And actually, interesting. I've got a question for you, and this is one that I don't know. So, of course, when you get a deceased person, you do a coronial file and all that sort of thing. With an incident like this where you got multiple victims deceased, how does a coronial system work? Is there one coronial for the whole lot of them, or do they do separate files for each person? I imagine they'd have to do separate files, but I mean, you're probably more of an expert than me because I've never dealt with that. So have you got an answer for me there?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. The major thing that I would see is that you would have a report given into the incident. So you go through the incident and you would rattle off individual findings for each victim. So, including the offender. So the offender would have a coronial finding as well. And basically the coroner, their job is to determine the identification of a person, the time, date, and place of their death, and the circumstances surrounding their death, as well as any recommendations that can prevent or that may come from the inquest, to improve society, basically, to prevent this happening in the future. So what will happen is that through some kind of coronial inquest, but this may go further. This could be a coronial. This could be a royal commission. Who knows? It will definitely be a very, very big inquiry, and I believe there has to be a coronial inquest. That's part of it. But whether that gets tied into a bigger inquiry, I'm not sure yet. But that's what I suspect will occur. Given that there's so many other aspects that need to be looked at. I mean, the death of these people. Obviously we pay tribute to the poor buggers, the victims of this incident. But when you're looking at the situation overall, what occurred to each individual victim is not necessarily the important parts of the outcome of the inquest, which is how do we prevent this in the future, or is there any learning points for emergency services? Are there any learning points through public place gatherings that need to be applied in the future to prevent this kind of thing? So each individual person will have a coronial finding. That, I would imagine, for a matter like this, would all be tied into the same report and probably definitely the same inquest.
Yeah, definitely, mate. One of them was actually, and so a question we got asked actually from one of our listeners, I just remembered it then, was the fact that do New South Wales Police carry long arms in the car, as first responders and all that sort of thing? And I mean, in the police, we could carry them. I mean, if we were trained in the AR-15, there was nothing stopping us taking it out. And there were times when we did roll around if there was a threat or, critical threat that we thought was available. However, I mean, this one, there probably was no information about a threat, so nobody would have been carrying. But a question, I imagine New South Wales are similar to what we were, but if anybody, especially New South Wales Police, Correct me if I'm wrong, but I imagine you can carry long arms around if in your car while you're doing general duties. And if not, yeah, correct me.
Yeah, I don't know is the short answer to that. I could certainly make a phone call and find out, but yeah, I don't know. And yeah, like you said, in the Northern Territory, we've always, as long as you were qualified on the old school AR-15s back in the day, you could take them out, and there was no issue with that. It was just a matter of signing them out of the armory. There was no issue around that. If you were qualified, you could take it. Simple as that. We were all qualified to use the Remington 870 pump action shotgun. It was encouraged that people take that. We used to have secure areas and vehicles that we could put them. But when it came to the AR-15, it was kind of, but both long arms were kind of voluntary. Oh, case by case, it was up to you. It was your decision to take a long arm with you. I know my mate Todd. He religiously carried the. What happened was the AR-15 program progressed, and they brought in what they call patrol rifles, which are an AR-15 variant. Just a little bit more recent. The ones we used to carry were, I'm sure, they were from Vietnam. They were bloody old school. So anyway, I think the new ones were really top of the line, high quality AR-15 rifles with different tactical applications, and they also had light sources, good optics, everything like that. So we were allowed. I wasn't necessarily. I wasn't qualified in the patrol rifle. I never did that course. They didn't put sergeants through it for some reason. They sort of wanted all the troops to go through, but which is fair enough. But I would have thought you'd put a sergeant through first. But anyway, I didn't make that decision. But he was qualified with the patrol rifle. Todd, this is, and I know he took it every shift. He had it in the back of his car every shift. So it was a bit. It was fairly lax. It was like, yeah, take it. But obviously, if something kicked off, the downside was everyone would, or somebody would rush back to the station and grab them, and maybe grab a handful of them and bring them out to everybody else at the scene. But obviously, your Glock handgun was compulsory for your frontline police on duty. And look, NT police, I've been out for a day or two now, so correct me if I'm wrong. It could be now there's a policy where you're on duty, you wear the belt. I know that there were plenty of times, especially in the early days, Schultzy out bush, the belt was non-existent. You just put a party pack in your pocket, and that was about it. Oh, not even a party pack, just a little pepper spray in your pocket.
Yeah, that's about it. And look, a lot of the times, yeah. I'm not sure if I mentioned it before. I went to one where an incident got out of hand, and we went to arrest this guy in a angry mob, and then realised we didn't have our belts on because it was the first thing in the morning. We went around to grab a coffee, and got involved in this, and then we had to tactically disengage to go back and get our belt. So, yeah, I mean, these days, I know, and even then you could probably get a bit of smack on the wrist, but they never really looked at it too much. I know there were some commanders that, liked you to wear it, but there's also a lot of communities where you didn't really have to, and it could actually create a bit of animosity if you did. And not to say that that wasn't a concern, or that was not a concern. It's just saying that, you try and work with the community, and if you didn't, most of the time those places were not a threat. You could probably talk your way out of 95% of cases. It was just, I can understand it from the department's point, because if you get caught if you get caught with their pants down, it makes them look bad. So it's just one of those things. And in saying that, mate, one of the things I work with Rossiter, I'll mention him. He was one of my senior partners for a while, and he used to make sure we took out the shotgun all the time. Not everybody did, but he was a firearms instructor as well. But his main point was, yeah, it's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. But also, it makes you familiar with the firearm, which, has been proven in the past. People have decided not to take on police when they see how well they handle a firearm. So it's all that part of the procedure and learning and making it muscle memory makes you better when those high risk situations, like what happened down in Bondi, means you can react that bit quicker and a bit more professional. So if you do have the option to take it out, it was drummed into me at a very young age. When I was just a piglet running around in a police uniform, that we take it out every single shift, just to familiarise yourself. So what are your thoughts there?
Mate, I think, firstly, I'll talk about history. So You got to remember when we joined the police, we're talking 18 years ago now. So there were less, I would say, there were less threats in the world back then than there are now. We had a relaxed nature about us, and that was good for de-escalation. We could come on, brother, it's all right, mate, just come on, calm down. We weren't tactically unaware. We certainly were capable of using tactical policing when we needed to. Not tactical response group level tactics, but certainly, empty hand tactics. You've got to remember that, do you want to be pulled over by a special forces soldier every time you get caught speeding? Like, the police do a lot of work. Something like this has never occurred before, a shooting like this in Bondi Beach. You can say till the cows come home that, yeah, but it could happen at any time. Yeah, it could. We could also get a 50-metre tsunami at any time. And that's completely correct. It could occur. Are we completely ready for that? No. There's a million what ifs. There's what if this happens, what if that. Yeah, we are prepared for most things. There's a lot of shootings. We do have very highly trained specialist police that deal with very highly problematic situations. Going on top of that, if the situation is far beyond the capability of the police forces in the States, they can enliven what's called a DFAC-A request, or a Defence Force Aid to Civil Authorities request, through the Department of Defence, and have commandos so TAG East, or the Tactical Assault Group East in Sydney, and the Tactical Assault Group West in Perth, and they can respond to anywhere in the country. And they don't talk. They turn up and splatter brains all over the place. That's their job. And they do it extremely effectively. So we've got the ability to escalate a situation. What we don't have, and what I think is almost unfeasible, is having a high level of tactical response ability right on the ground immediately. There's going to be a delay for those specialist resources to turn up. They're called specialists because they don't happen all the time. It's like a bomb disposal expert. Are you going to spend money and train every single GD's copper in how to disarm a bomb, or are you going to teach them how to take a statement? The fact is that taking statements is something they're going to do 20 times a shift. Well, that's an exaggeration. Lots of times a shift. Talking to people, communication skills, interviewing witnesses, interviewing offenders, charging and bailing. That is what happens in policing all the time. Driving. Absolutely, firearms training and defensive tactics. I would say you use defensive tactics, 50,000 times more regularly than anyone would ever pull a firearm, even just to the port, without aiming it. So, yeah, you've got to cover these things off, but you've got to remember that pulling a firearm and being involved in a tactical situation is such a minuscule part of policing. It has to be covered. But I mean, what kind of superhuman are you going to get to be these police officers if you're going to have, someone who can very empathetically interview a child victim of some kind of atrocity and do that very well? Because I guarantee you those absolute gunslingers from TRG are not the best at that. Are you going to have people who are slightly more introverted who can do those really in-depth forensic detail examinations of crime scenes and have them trained to be tactical operators as well? Of course not. Are you going to get your actual tactical operators who need to train those skills over and over and over all day, every day, becoming subject matter experts in different aspects of that tactical police response? Are you going to get them to be trained up to do coffee with a cop and go and hang out and talk nicely to the civilians in the street? No. The police force is a big, diverse thing that addresses every aspect of what they need to do. But they're not all going to turn up within 3 minutes of an incident kicking off where, bloody hell, it would have been nice to have TOUs sitting in position as these guys came out of their vehicles. Yeah, great. If you can get a crystal ball to work, you're better than me. We're human beings. You do the best you can. You develop the skill sets across the state as best you can. And then you always evolve and you make things better. But you've just got to be realistic about this. I think, and I'll finish ranting in 1 minute. I think the big thing that I think will come out of this is that there's going to be a change of posture within police forces around Australia, where we used to carry a firearm, a long arm, I should say, if we felt like it, basically. However, I think what's going to happen is everyone's going to go through a more extensive firearms training package through the college, and a more extensive firearms package through your annual requals. And I think what will come of this is that patrol rifles, so the AR-15 capability, will be available in every vehicle, and every general duties vehicle in Australia will have a long arm capability. I think that's just inevitable. And New Zealand, while they don't routinely carry firearms, they bloody well do. They're just in the vehicle.
Yeah, yeah, mate, that's exactly right. And yeah, yeah, you raised some very good points there. Yeah, mate, I've actually just lost what I was going to say. It was really, really good too, but it's just escaped me somehow. Yeah, carrying long arms. Oh, that's what I was going to say. You made a very good point there, and I say this all the time. What happens back when go back 2 decades, a police shooting would happen very rarely. Like, you might hear about it every now and again. And it's not because the media are so much onto it now or there's more social media. They just didn't happen as often. I mean, in the Territory, they hardly ever happened. But even towards the end of our careers, they were getting a little bit more prevalent, where you'd have to probably pull your gun out and stuff like that. And unfortunately, now, I think just about every week I hear about, especially just Queensland alone, coppers having to pull their guns and shoot someone. It's happening more and more regularly. So, of course, police have to evolve with the times, and it's unfortunate that they have to do that. But it's just, I think, what has to be done. And look, I'm not going to tell you why that's happening. It just is. So you just got to deal with it.
It is a shame. The world we grew up in is gone, Schultzy. We're almost bloody dinosaurs, mate. So it is. You are completely correct. I think I've said this when we spoke about lethal use of force in the podcast earlier on. When I first started policing, we would talk about the police shooting that happened in the 90s. It was the last police shooting that had occurred when we joined the job. It had happened in 2002. We joined in 2007. It was very rare for police shootings to occur. Now, like you say, they happen quite a bit. There's been an escalation in violence in society, worldwide, I would say. Violence has always been around, but there's been some kind of escalation, especially towards authority. While we keep trying to regulate, politicians try and regulate more and more the whole community, it's like, why don't you dig a little deeper and find out the root cause of the problem? And I think this will be our next point. Anthony Albanese's come out, almost immediately and said, we're immediately going to look at gun laws. It's like, bloody hell. When I was a kid in St. George in Queensland, when I was a very little kid, I mean younger than 5 years old, I remember this vividly because I used to like guns. My grandfather used to take us shooting over on his block, and I was a little kid. I loved guns. But to me, guns were something you used to hunt. They weren't a weapon to hurt people. You'd walk down the street and see Toyota Land Cruisers with gun racks inside the cabs, but up in the back window of the vehicle. You could see the rifles from the street. Every second Toyota had 2 rifles in gun racks behind their head. And that was just, everyone had it. There was no issue. If you went down to the little the sports store, which sold rifles, they were the gun dealer in St. George, people would buy a new rifle and walk out with it proudly with a box of bullets in their hand, and they'd walk down the street with a new shiny gun. It'd take them 20 minutes to get to their car because everyone would go, oh, did you get a new rifle from, I can't remember his name. But anyway, the old fella, oh, give us a look at that. And they'd be cycling the bolt and looking through the scope and all kinds of shit, taking sight pictures in the street. No one batted an eyelid because there was no threat. They were just interested in the object. That's all it was. And I just remember that was just normal. That was life. But I tell you what there wasn't was crime. There was bugger all crime. The biggest crime that took place there was, the young blokes that go do burnouts in their cars full of grog down, they'd all drive out after the pub's shut and go down by the river and do burnouts in their cars and light fires and play music. When I say light fires, like campfires, and sit around them, and someone would pull out a guitar and they'd be drinking piss. If they did that now, all their cars would be seized and they'd all be arrested. But my old man even tells from the late 70s, the copper would turn up and go, how we going tonight, fellas? Everything good? I'd hate to see everybody get hurt tonight. Just take care as you're driving home. And I know that's never going to occur now. But there was a sense of human responsibility there. It's like, you guys go out and have fun. You're out of town, no worries. You got cars, you got alcohol, you got this. There was an expectation, and anyone who even spoke about, I'll go and get my gun and blow your brains out, was considered the biggest weirdo in town, and no one would be around them. The people would hold them to account immediately. Normally, don't speak like that, smack. That sort of thing just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen anymore. There seems to be an escalated level of violence.
No, mate, you're exactly right there. Actually, one of the things I'll talk about, and I won't mention any names, but of someone I know very well. He was a copper back in the days, and this is going back in the 80s, or late 70s. And occasionally, when working out bush, the local publican would call them up and sit there and go, "Oh, there's a few people coming in tonight. Could be a bit of trouble. There's a bit of animosity between this crew." And he goes, "Can you just come along? You'll get free drinks. Just put your police cap on the bar." And he used to go and sit in and just get free drinks all night. And he would sit there and just put his police cap on the bar, because the publican knew if that police cap was there wouldn't be any trouble, because people would think twice. You try and do that now, you probably get somebody try and pick a fight with you.
Yeah, not only would you become the biggest target, you'd be charged internally for some kind of breach of discipline. There'd be all kind of dramas. You would be done for corruption for receiving gifts and benefits. That would never occur. You would last about 20 seconds in this police force these days. And that's just the way it is.
Oh, dear. So, yeah, that's right. I think I was born 2 decades too late.
Oh, yeah. No. So, mate, I don't think we need to bang on. I think what we're saying, I think a lot of people who share similar views to us agree. People who don't agree, okay, no worries. Tell me the solution. You tell me the solution. Do I think clamping ridiculously down on licensed, law-abiding gun owners is the answer? No. I don't disagree with our gun laws. I was a little surprised to hear that a non-Australian citizen was able to get a gun license. That would be the only thing I'd suggest. Maybe you've got to be an Australian citizen to get a gun license in this country. But apart from that, I don't see a problem with our gun laws. The number of licensed firearms owners around where I am now, there would be, within 10 kilometres of me, there would probably be 500 firearms. Do I feel unsafe in this community? God, no. I feel safe as houses in this community. I'm a licensed gun holder. I'm a licensed firearms user, and I have firearms. I don't use them very often, but when I do need them, they're there. I've got livestock. I've got pest control. I actually, by law, have to be able to control feral pests on a travelling stock route that I lease to put cattle on. So I have to be able to I either have to pay a professional hunter to come in there and kill things, or I have to go up there myself and do it. And I'd much prefer to just do it myself. It costs a shitload less. So the firearms are necessary. The other thing is that there are so many gun ranges around the place where all over the country that are run completely safely. They're an excellent place for young people to develop a skill, to learn discipline, to understand consequence for action. Understand that you're holding an item right now that's extremely dangerous. We're trusting you with that item. We're going to show you how to use it properly, and we're going to teach you all about them. I almost think it would be better if people were more exposed to guns so that it became less of a shock value. It's almost like back in the day, guns were no big deal. The behaviour of people who had guns was the thing. When people had guns, they were very respectful with them. They would never... When I spoke about... excuse me. I spoke about people walking down the road with firearms in the 80s in St. George. If that barrel ever covered another person, 4 or 5 other men in that street were, "Oh, young fella, watch where your bloody barrel's pointing," even if the bolt was out of it. There was just a respect for firearms. Everyone had them, and there was a respect for them. When, like I said, they would look through the scope and take sight pictures, they would do that into the ground, or into a building with nothing around, where just looking through the scope. They're not even manipulating the working parts, nothing. It was just interest in the device. It had nothing to do with the fact that you could cause problems. There was no thought given to the fact that anyone's going to load this rifle and start shooting people in the street. It just didn't even cross their mind. I don't know. I'm not
Yeah,
against
I,
national
I,
service or something.
I mean, and look, I grew up bush as well. My dad had firearms, for pest control, and we lived on a farm and all that sort of thing. But the first rule, when we're trained in firearms in the police, is treat every firearm as if it were loaded. Never assume it's empty. That was knocked into me when I was 4 years old. Well, I'm not really sure what age I was, but never, cover or point. What is it? Anything that you're not wishing to destroy. That's the second one. Never point in a dangerous direction. Always point to the ground. We say when you're carrying a firearm, you always carry it with it pointed to the ground because that's the safest direction when you're carrying, and just in case it has got a round in the chamber. And you always manipulate the firearm when you get it and check it. That at the rules 101, we learnt them at a young age, and I think you're correct there. Did I ever feel, and it would have been the same around me, there would have been hundreds of firearms. Did I ever feel danger? No. I used to hear the next door neighbour, shooting their ducks or, vermin that were probably, hampering their stock and all that sort of thing all the time. Did I feel? No, because I knew they were trained to not point towards our direction. They would always make sure there was, something safe behind to stop the bullet if it carried through. It was just ingrained in people. And mate, I completely agree with you in relation to the gun laws. I would say the only thing you probably need to do is maybe put more resources into the firearms unit to monitor those gun laws. And like you said, having a non-Australian citizen holding a gun, well, that might be something you need to look at. But also, everybody, just monitor the licenses every now and again. Do a mental, just check on their history, all that sort of stuff. Just put resources into where it needs to be done, because I think we actually do have some very good gun laws. We're probably one of the best in the world in that, in that statement.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm just going to challenge myself here. Always assume every firearm is loaded. Never assume it's empty. Never cover or point at anything you are not willing to destroy. Keep your finger off the trigger and outside the trigger guard until your sights are on target and you've decided to fire. Beware of your target, what's in front of it, what's behind it. Never fire at anything you haven't positively identified. Northern Territory Police, I want you to get onto me and tell me how I went.
I tell you what, mate, I reckon that was almost word for word. And for anybody joining the Northern Territory Police, just replay that to yourself, because that's pretty much, we had to get that verbatim when we did it. Had to be word for word, comma for comma. But yeah, mate, and how many years is that old, mate? It's almost 20 years since you first learnt that.
It'll be 19 years in February. So, yeah, that just they used to ram it down our throat. That's what I'm talking about. Guns were around. Mate, guns were everywhere. Remember sitting, what's the safest you've ever felt in your life? I'll tell you what I did. It was sitting in a muster room full of cops. Every single one of us had a gun on our hip. Every single one of us had access to the armory and could have grabbed a bloody AR-15 with 30 rounds in it and just wiped the whole police station out. But that was the safest place in the world for me, was inside that muster room. Absolutely surrounded by an entourage of firearms. So, to me, firearms aren't the deal. Maybe bringing people into the country who want to kill us all is the problem. But anyway, we're not a political podcast and we never will be. I just think we need to take a lot bigger look at the people who do this stuff. And not necessarily, look, I don't want to be the US. I've got nothing against the US. I quite like the US. It's not that. I just don't want to be in a situation where people who should not have guns have shitloads of guns, and the guns they have can fire bloody multiple rounds a second. A minute. I'm not interested in that. I like the fact here that there are, these are extremely dangerous things. You can pick this thing up and I can instantly kill lots and lots of people with this device. They're a necessary thing, and in a responsible hand, they are completely harmless. They will never hurt a soul. But in the wrong hands, they are devastating, and I think that's the point. But, mate, from here, I think that's the political side of it, and that's my view on firearms. I think the beauty of us is both of us politically are raging centrists. I think extreme left-wing people are complete morons. Communism's never worked. Get over it, folks. You don't get to control everyone's thought processes. Move on. The extreme right wing are a bunch of fucking morons as well. I'm not interested in what you have to say. Go out and hate everyone all you want. The extreme right doesn't work either. The centre's where you need to be. Just be a good human being, and nothing will go wrong. If everyone in the world just went, I'm not going to commit any crime today, I'm going to pick up a piece of rubbish if I find it. I'm going to help a little old lady across the road. I'm going to pull over for the car on the side of the road with someone changing a tyre. If everybody did that, the world would be a magnificent place. That makes me sound like a naive fool, and guess what? I ain't one. I'm just saying, it's got a lot more to do with the humans in the world than it does with the devices that are available to them.
Yep, and I completely agree with you. You're dead right. Mate, one thing I reckon, as we move on from this, one thing we actually failed to mention, we've done over 100 episodes.
Yeah, someone pointed that out to me. I hadn't even realised. Well, I've been a bit hectic. It's, I think we're up to 101 or 102, are we?
Yeah, mate. So this is 102 this week. When we first started, I don't think we ever expected to go this far. We didn't discount it, but people listening and our listenership is definitely growing and all that sort of thing. So yeah, thank you to all the listeners that kept this podcast going. And look, we do have some more exciting stuff in the future. In fact, it's getting so big now. I'm going to have to spend more time on it. Where I find that time and where you find that time, we're not really sure yet. But thank you to everybody that's listened so far. It's actually amazing to hear all your feedback. And again, I do apologise for anybody that I'll try and get back to everybody I possibly can. And when we have one about Damon and I, will go through a lot of the questions that people have asked us. But mind you, there's hundreds now. But yeah, thanks for everybody. And there are definitely some exciting things. Again, I'll mention again, I'm going to New Zealand in the new year. And I'll give you a bit more update when I'm there. Hopefully, I'm going to arrange a time where I'm probably, especially in Christchurch, where if any cops in Christchurch want to come and have a beer with one of the ordinary cops, Schultzy, I will buy you a beer. So I'll put that on Facebook. So if you want to come down for a chat and just yarn, just talk about the good times, have a laugh. That's what it's all about. So, so I'll be doing that, and I'll be looking into a bit more in that Boy in the Water podcast. So if anybody's interested in that, down in Gore, I'm actually taking a trip down there. So I just want to get my head around it. I've listened to all the, investigative journalists about it, but it's just intrigued me enough to look a little bit deeper into it and just see what's really. There's just a couple of unanswered questions that I'd like to that people also ask me that I'd like to look into. So yeah, but mate, I reckon that might be just about us. What do you reckon? Unless you've got a carton of the week.
I've got a carton of the week, mate. I have a carton of the week, and it's firearms related. So I'm not going to name you completely, but Constable A from Tennant Creek Police Station in about 2013. She had just done an extremely long night shift. It was about 10 o'clock in the morning, and she'd gone to remove a gun belt into the armory, taken a gun out, done the unload, gone through the process. And the process is basically you go in, you stand in front of the wall, you've got your safe direction, so there's basically a mat. I know different jurisdictions do it differently, but there's a mat in front of you that's made out of ballistic material, and it always goes into a concrete wall, so the bullet can't go anywhere if you do let off a negligent discharge. She's gone in there, eyes hanging out of her head. She's taken a Glock out, and she just forgot to take the magazine out before she starts. She's done this 1,000 times, but this particular night she was absolutely stuffed. And she cycled the rack, and she hasn't noticed the rounds flying out every time she cycled the rack of the Glock. And the last one, she took a perfect sight picture, and the last thing you do is you take a sight picture and squeeze the trigger, and it goes click, so you release your working parts. But you have the magazine out of the gun before you do that. She's gone rack, not noticed 3 live rounds come out of the gun. Sight picture, squeeze the trigger, kaboom! Straight into the mat. And the CCTV of that was priceless. You could just see her absolutely overwhelmed by the sound. Like imagine a 40 cal going off in a bloody concrete room. You can see her then just drop her shoulders in absolute pissed offedness at herself, put a gun down, and just put her hands to her face like, how could this day get any worse? You then see the shift sergeant go in and go, are you okay? And you can see her just go, I need to go home. The poor bugger.
Yeah.
Extremely competent police officer. Just a human being who'd been at work for way too long. But you don't get to shoot the wall of the Tennant Creek Police Station without buying beer. So Constable
No,
A,
that's exactly right.
yep, Constable A from from what are we up to? 12 years ago. Buy beer if you haven't already. I don't know if she had to or not, but yeah, buy beer.
Yeah.
Firearms
That's right.
related.
No, not just one, a carton. It's definitely a cartonable
Oh,
offence.
one is a carton.
It,
There's no,
yeah, that's right. Yeah. And look, there is another one in Catherine, but I might mention that next one. That one's pretty funny, especially some of the police jokes that came after it.
yeah.
But yeah, we'll save that one for next week. But
Yeah,
but
definitely.
anybody else that's got them coming on, give us your cartonable offences, and we'll mention them on the podcast. We'll definitely get better at it. As we move forward. But, mate, I reckon that's
Yeah.
almost us. What do you reckon?
That'll do us, mate. And look, once again, on a serious note, from the 200 cops, our greatest condolences to everybody at Bondi Beach. This is a tragedy that doesn't occur in the Australia I know and love, and I think we need to get back to that. This is stuff we see overseas. It's not what we see here. So, on that note, mate, we'll see you next week.
Yep. All right. We'll see you all then.